He's Bob Costas, Major League Baseball Network analyst, Hall of Fame broadcaster, joining us on the program. Bob, good morning. How are you?
Hello, Dan. How are you? I'm now caught up in this whole kerfluffle between you and Mr. Schrager.
Yeah. It's sometimes you sample. Musicians talk about sampling or borrowing. We used to call it stealing, but, we say something on Monday, it ends up on the Football Network on Wednesday, and we have spies out there, Bob. We're journalists.
Yeah. I was just speaking before Todd called me. I was just speaking with Bruce Kornblatt, whom you know from NBC. And Bruce was praising Tom Berducci's work yesterday in the coverage of the Hall of Fame elections. And Tom has a particular knack for this. He's not just knowledgeable, but he's really a graceful writer. And he wrote this piece about Mariano Rivera. And he said that 11 earned runs were scored upon him in all of the postseason appearances that he made. Mm-hmm. Fewer runs than men who have walked on the moon. Okay? Then this morning, on a show which shall not be mentioned, they presented that as if it were a stat they just discovered. It happens all the time, Dan.
Oh, I know.
And it happens to those of us who are at a higher level. They don't steal from those who occupy the lower rungs on the ladder. Consider it a compliment, Dan.
Oh, I know. We were having fun with it. But it feels like it's okay now. You don't have to attribute anything to anybody anymore.
Right. Of course not.
All righty. It felt like you guys were waiting with your pitchforks, as you guys mentioned, that somebody was not going to vote for Mariano Rivera. You almost sounded disappointed that there wasn't some old curmudgeon who said, nope, I'm not going to put him on because I didn't vote for Babe Ruth.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. But no curmudgeons. That was the final tally. 425 yeses and 0 curmudgeons. But if there had been one or two, then we eventually would have discovered who they were, and they would have to give an account of themselves. But that doesn't happen.
The 100%, what does the 100% mean? If you're Mariano Rivera and you're the first, you're one of one, is he the most perfect player at his position in baseball? Like, how would you quantify this, if at all?
I think it shows that there is no argument, no credible argument of any kind to be made against him. Next year, when Derek Jeter will go in, perhaps unanimous, certainly nearly unanimous, someone could make the case, you or I wouldn't buy it, but they could make the case, well, if Cal Ripken wasn't unanimous, Jeter plays the same position, then why should Jeter be unanimous? I'm going to withhold my vote. But there is absolutely no dispute that Mariano Rivera is the greatest closer in baseball history. You could make a case who's the best player, who's the best outfielder, who's the best catcher. We might all feel that there's a clear-cut choice in some of those cases, but there's an argument to be made for somebody else. There's no argument to be made for anybody else when it comes to Rivera as the top closer.
Your phone's popping a little bit. Give us a second here. Yeah. Fritzy, if you'll jump on with Bob, we'll see if we can clear that up a little bit. I was looking at, Edgar Martinez, I mentioned, that the fourth highest on-base percentage of a right-handed hitter in the history of the game. Mike Mussina, Mussina was sort of lost in the Clemens, Pettit. Like, you just sort of went, oh, yeah. He won 20 games and then retired. I think 2 pitchers in the history of the game had done that. Sandy Koufax, due to injury, retired. He might have won 26 or 27 games last year and then retires. And then Mussina, same way, won 20 games. But I was looking at Mussina's numbers, 250 wins and 2,500 strikeouts. It's a short list of, some of these. I think these are guys, I'm glad they got in. But I think aside from Mariana, you sort of forgot about how great they were, and that even includes Roy Halladay. Bob's back with us. As you were saying, Bob?
Yeah, my deathless comments apparently were lost in a bad phone connection. But my point to your question about Rivera was that, let's say Derek Jeter, who's going to get in easily next year, could be unanimous. If it isn't, it'll just be a few votes that keep it from being unanimous. And the only possible argument against him, but it is a possible argument as well, if Cal Ripken wasn't unanimous, then I'm not going to vote for Derek Jeter because he played the same position. But in the case of Mariano Rivera, there is absolutely no argument to be made for anybody else as the greatest closer of all time. You want to argue Willie Mays and Hank Aaron, you can make a credible case for either one. They're both phenomenally great. But there's absolutely no discussion about anybody else when it comes to who's the best closer of all time. And I think that, along with changing voting patterns, is what made it possible for Mariano to go and sweep the board.
Do we have too much analytics in baseball?
In some quarters, yes. In some quarters, it's, look, if I can show you that this guy's WAR is equal to somebody who you knew at first glance was a Hall of Famer, well, then that guy is just as good as this guy who's among the true baseball immortals. I think analytics are really important, both for building teams and making decisions in the present day, and also for considering players historically and considering them for the Hall of Fame. I'm not saying they don't count. They count a lot. But they're not always definitive. They're not the be-all and end-all. And if you think the whole thing can be decided by what a computer spits out, then I think you're taking the heartbeat out of the game.
I know that you guys have talked about this the last couple of days on the MLB Network, and you're talking about Bonds and Clemens being on the clock, and now we have a 3-year window of them trying to get in during their years of eligibility. I'm wondering if A-Rod will eventually be the first steroid-tainted player, known steroid-tainted player, into the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Well, we didn't discuss that on the air yesterday, but a number of the guys, and I won't name them, a number of the guys, former players, say there is no way that A-Rod will ever get in because he used PEDs when there was testing, when there was punishment, when everything had been codified, when the dust had cleared with the steroid era and everybody got what was going on. And so despite the fact that it's pretty clear to me that he would have been one of the greatest players of all time if he never had anything more potent than a protein shake, he's going to have a tough climb. You look at Manny Ramirez. Now, Manny Ramirez was not nearly as good an all-round player as Alex Rodriguez. What works against Manny is not just the 3 failed drug tests, but the fact that he openly quit on 2 teams, no question about it, the fact that he was an indifferent fielder and a lousy base runner. So you can't make a case that he was a great all-round player. You can make a case that he was one of the best right-handed hitters of the modern era. But the connection to PEDs plus the other deficits takes him out of it. So he's not an exact match for A-Rod, but he did use PEDs after there were rules in place. And I think the same thing is going to hamper A-Rod a bit. He's a better player with better accomplishments, so I'm sure his vote totals will be higher than Ramirez. But can he get to 75? We'll see. Harold Reynolds said yesterday, we weren't on the air, but he said, look, he comes on the ballot in 3 years. You got 10 years on the ballot. You're talking 13 years out. And younger voters who might not have the same gut feeling about the steroid era that you and I do. So A-Rod has a chance because the stuff is going to be in the rearview mirror by the time his eligibility runs out.
Do you think Bonds and Clemens get in the next 3 years?
I really thought so until yesterday. Peter Gammons and I were talking, and we both thought that Bonds and Clemens would get at least to the low 60s and probably to the mid-60s based on the substantial jump they took a year ago. But they only moved up 2 percentage points to around 59%. Now, they have 3 years left, and here are the things that could help them. 4 players get in, plus Fred McGriff, who probably didn't get justice. Fred McGriff comes off because this was his 10th year of eligibility. That's 5 slots. Next year, Derek Jeter is the only player worthy of consideration. And in 2021, there is no additional player worthy of consideration. So that clears the logjam out. And during that period of time, a few more younger voters will come in. And as Tom Verducci pointed out yesterday, those who have become eligible to vote in the last several years are trending at 85% yes for Bonds and Clemens. And it's possible, we can't read their minds, but it's possible that some of the old line voters are going to come around in the 10th year and that their thinking was, I'm going to make them sweat. I'm going to hold my nose and vote for them in the 10th year, but not a moment before. And if those combinations come together, more space on the ballot, more new voters, old guys coming around, maybe they eke over 75, but they're not going to get 80% or anything close to it.
Are we being objective with Curt Schilling?
No, I've been saying forever that he should have gone in on the first ballot. Curt Schilling has the best strikeout-to-walk ratio of any pitcher whose career started after 1900. He has a phenomenal postseason record, 11-2, the low ERA, but also iconic moments on top of it. Pitched well in 4 World Series, 3 of which his team won. It just does, and he finished second in the Cy Young voting 3 times, and the only reason he didn't win 1 or 2 is that Greg Maddux and Randy Johnson won those Cy Youngs. Now, the stuff that he says on Twitter or the things that rub people the wrong way are completely irrelevant. What matters is what he did on the field, and Curt Schilling should have been in the Hall of Fame years ago.
Now, I wonder if he contributed to MSNBC, if he was as far left as he is far right, would he be in the Hall of Fame?
Oddly, I don't think it would hurt him as much.
Yeah.
But it's irrelevant either way.
Oh, I know. That's why it drives me crazy when, like, I just look at Curt Schilling. Well, I don't agree with Curt Schilling, but I look at Curt Schilling and I have to be objective. I didn't like Barry Bonds, but I have to be objective when I look at his career, or somebody else who wasn't friendly to me. But I have to just look at this and say, are you a Hall of Famer or not? And I look at Schilling. If I said you got a game to win and you can pick anybody in the history of the game, or let's say since 1970, Curt Schilling's going to be on the short list, I believe, whether you like him or not. And
absolutely.
You know, there's something to be said about it. It's like Jack Morris. I argued for Jack Morris because I said he didn't give a damn about his ERA. He went out and pitched in big games for big teams, you know, winning championships. And Schilling was that way. He wanted the ball and he wanted to go the distance. And, you know, there's value in that. He made him not have, you know, doesn't have the numbers that match up with some of these other guys, but he's a Hall of Famer in my book.
Yeah, the numbers that don't match up are victory totals. He's just over 200. But the other numbers, the ERA, the postseason performances, the strikeout to walk ratio, those are off the chart.
Yeah. Bob, good to catch up with you. Thanks for joining us as always.
All right, Dan, take it easy.
Right.
Bye.
The great Bob Costas joining us.
For more Dan Patrick Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV or download the Dan Patrick Show app.